We found Tomo after I'd been searching for about 2 or 3 months, and Louise was cast in the film, and we got I think pretty much everybody apart from the main character. And I knew I was never going to find the kid I wanted in a stage school, but I was kind of hoping that I'd find one in a drama school at least, even in an inner city workshop like Nottingham, and just in the sort of hope that I'd be able to get one that would sort of half wanted to be an actor so they'd make it to the end. And that didn't happen, and so we called in this guy called Des Hamilton, who was a specialist street caster and had found the kid in Ratcatcher and got a really great reputation for just going out into council estates and basically real areas and giving out cards and getting kids to come to auditions. And Tomo was one of those. He was found that there's a project called the Space Project in Grimsby, which is for kids who maybe aren't in school or aren't in school a lot, and of which Tomo was at the time. And he just turned up on a tape, and I watched this tape. It's on the website that we've set up for the film. He actually shows what is it, Mark? This is englandmovie.co.uk, and you can actually see that very first audition. He's no bigger than my hand. I mean, he's tiny. That joke about him being 3, that's quite rude because he's grown a lot. And I saw this tape, and it was like looking in a mirror 20 years ago. And seeing myself, this little kid who was obviously smaller than every single other person on that tape, but had more balls than anyone on there. And I wanted to meet him from seeing that tape, and I went and met him, and he scared the life out of me because I thought, I'll be lucky if I get 5 days out of this kid, never mind, a whole shoot. But he proved us kind of wrong and right at the same time, and he made it to the end, and obviously it was worth every second.
I think so too. Well done, Tomo. That's me clapping a Man United fan. He's had a right go about me about Arsenal backstage there. I mean,
I'm 6 and then
showbiz, darling, you'll learn. I don't know how you do it, but you do bring fantastic performances. You've done this throughout your career. You've done fantastic performances out of non-professional actors or actors that we haven't seen that much. Do you think you have a special relationship with your crew? Because that's I've luckily enough to have been at the NFT several times. That's the most raucous green room I've ever seen in my entire life. Pizza has been flying, insults have been flying, but it's an extraordinary atmosphere that people backstage have said is exactly the same as your sets.
Yeah, I suppose. I learnt a massive lesson when I made Once Upon a Time in the Midlands, which was that I didn't realise that I even had a process or I even had a technique, because I sort of taught myself to make films, and it wasn't until I got it wrong and I changed everything that I realised what was right and what I should be doing. So that was like me going to college, if you like. Doing Once Upon a Time in the Midlands was like going to film school for me, because it was like everything I possibly could have sort of done outside of what I'd been doing before, I managed to just get it wrong. And it's not that I detest the film, but so it just doesn't seem to sort of fit with the others, and that's what taught me, to be honest with you. And after that, Dead Man's Shoes was a reaction to that, and Dead Man's Shoes was the film Midlands was meant to be, believe it or not. That started out as that kind of story. So that kind of realising that working with people, well, there's 2 things. One is that if you see someone like Tomo in a role, if I pick the kid from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, it's not believable in the same way. If it's someone that and I think this about picking big stars for things, and a lot of big stars for things, it's very difficult to buy someone as a skinhead if you know their face, or so there's 2 sides to it. One is that obviously if it's people that you've maybe not seen before, that lends itself for you to believe that this is a real group of friends. And the other thing is their appetite is insatiable. They don't care that we haven't got caravans, they don't care what the food's like, they want to be on set, they want to be acting, and they want to be part of making a film. And everyone knows on my films that I tell people in the very beginning that you might come in here with the main role, but if you don't put the effort in, your role will shrink and someone else's will grow in your place. So everyone knows on a daily basis that they have to be working all the time, and that's, possibly, that people who maybe haven't made it yet, they're the right kind of people for that way of working, I think.
But nevertheless, you seem to have this ensemble. We saw Andrew, but those were there at the beginning. We saw Andrew Shim come on, and he was quite happy for you to take the mickey out of him in public. He's still smarting. I think he's been in 6 of your films, from Romeo Brass to some of the shorts.
Yeah.
You like people that know how to work with you. Is it because you have this unique way of working that it takes a certain kind of spirit to be able to gel with you?
I remember I was doing Dead Man's Shoes, and we were stopping by this lake, and there was these birds that used to come in to this lake.
Women or
as in flappers, okay. Yeah. And Paddy was going to this like little family of ducks. They were perfect and preened, little baby ducks, and mummy and daddy and that. And I picked this little like almost a retarded duck. And Paddy said, "That's you. You always go for the little orphan. You know, you pick the one that no one else wants to pick, and you make, you know." And I was going and feeding that one because I thought, well, Paddy's not going to feed it. You know, Paddy's feeding this like pretty little family and that, 2 up, 2 down, Mercedes, and I was feeding the one with the Datsun. And yeah, so I think it's just inherent in my nature, you know. And when I make, you know, like Tomo, it wasn't myself, Mark, Stephen, Graham, and Andrew all made a pact early on, because it was like if I just used him for the film, and you know, and like left him, because I know what it's like coming down off a film. Everyone who's done one will know that you become like the best of friends with people, and then if you imagine, you know, where Tomo had come from in Grimsby, to go back to that life and to be left separated would have really not been a good thing to do. And so we made a thing early on, because we obviously liked him anyway, but it was like it can't be one of those film experiences where we just leave him at the end. And you know, and we've all, you know, he's been and stopped with a lot of us, and he's I don't know what he's been doing in his spare time, but he's unbeatable on many games on Xbox 360. He's like a robot. It's frightening. So he's been coming and seeing us, and that relationship's something that, you know, I've developed with Andrew, obviously, on Romeo Brass, and it's not something that, if you get involved with people and you ask them to give you their heart and soul, you can't, you know, you can't just sort of expect it for 6 weeks and then drop them like a stone, you know.
I certainly think, and I'm sure the audience who've just seen that certainly feel that has come off the screen in This Is England, which I think is a wonderful work about growing up and about England, about Britain. I've said to people that was my youth up there, even though I wasn't a skinhead and I didn't grow up in Uttoxeter. The specificity of it feels, I think, appeals to every single person, because it's every detail that's right in This Is England, from the boots to the music to the fences to the estates. Yeah. How did you get that? Because I mean, it is a period film. If you think it's about 24 years ago, this
yeah,
stuff. It feels to me completely vibrant and completely now, but nothing feels kind of Merchant Ivory, if you see what I mean. Nothing feels like it's too clean.
I suppose I didn't know I was a filmmaker when I was that age, but obviously I was absorbing things, and I am that kind of person. I frighten my mum and dad with the things that I remember from my childhood. My memories are so vivid, so I think the skinhead thing, if you think the first time that I was part of a gang, and I went from being this woolly-haired little kid with a reindeer jumper on, getting shoved into in the dinner queue, and you know, getting picked on the same as anybody else, and then, you know, it was this thing that my sister started going out with, this skinhead, and the way he carried himself and the swagger. They used to call him Pecker because he used to walk like that down the street, and he looked incredible. And I was like, I fancied the girls, the hair, everything about it. I was like, you know, the loins were moving on that level, and you know, the lads, the crack that they were having, the fact that there was no jobs, but they had this arrogance about them that was like, we don't give a flying fuck if we haven't got a job. We're going to cause you so much bother, and we're going to let our voices be known. And that kind of energy has disappeared from youth and vanished. And you know, you look around the streets now, you can spot a chav and a skate kid, but apart from that, there doesn't seem to be any separation with kids anymore. And you looked at that particular point in time, and there'd be a kid dressed up as Adamant, someone else looked like Boy George. You know, they were wandering around, these people, and they were really proud of what they believed in. And so I remembered that. You know, the 80s for me wasn't this kind of soundtrack of, now that's what I call music. It was much more than that, you know. And I remembered it, obviously, being a filmmaker, I obviously remembered it in a certain kind of way. And the main thing is that I look at that film and they feel like my old friends, you know. And that was the first thing, was that the gang had to feel. I didn't want it to be this romper stomper style alpha male, you know, mistreated girls, you know, all of that kind of thing. I remember the girls being as hard as the guys in that situation, and as frightening as the guys, if not more so. and I wanted the gang to be all shapes and all sizes as my gang was, because Uttoxeter wasn't big enough to have a really cool gang of skinheads. It had a fat one, a thin one, a long one, a small one.
Yes. And I mean, and the clothes and the music, I think, are integral to a film like this. I didn't say that they're all. I think they're always important in every aspect of film, and sometimes overlooked, I think. But in a film like this, if you get one detail wrong, I think the whole edifice crumbles. You know, the small, can of the pyramid of Coke cans, it will fall away if the boots are wrong or if the music is wrong. How hard did you work with that, or is it just simply instinctive to know that? No, it's Toots and the Maytals, Louie Louie, not the one from Animal House.
Yeah, I mean, I think being a skinhead at that time, 11, 12 years old, I think the first time you buy records, them memories stay with you, and you remember what people told you and why you were buying it. And, the very first record I bought was Candy Girl, I think, by New Edition, so I'm not proud of that one.
Bobby Brown.
No, it was Candy Girl, and I went in saying, no, it's the New Edition. He was going, no, the band's called New Edition. I said, no, this is the New Edition of Candy Girl. And I had that argument, and then I met Pekka, and he sort of saved my life, really. But I remember going to Stafford with this guy, and going on the bus and travelling with him, and he took me under his wing, and at the same time, to be fair, I was listening. He was buying Who records, Yardbirds, Small Faces, alongside educating me about the sort of roots of skinhead culture, and would buy Toots and the Maytals, Cimarip, Upsetters, Desmond Decker, and one week they'd go and see Oi bands, the following week they'd go and see someone like Desmond Decker at Nottingham, and this guy really was completely aware of that part of skinhead culture. And
because most people would associate skinheads with a punk movement, or certainly a more kind of violent movement than the kind of dancehall or kind of reggae influence of the late 60s.
Yeah, I suppose the thing that was put across to me was I could be a skinhead because I was working class. It was like that basically it wasn't a rich boy's game. A pair of docks, a pair of work jeans, white shirt, braces if you'd got them, shaved head, and that was the job done. It was like there was something about that immediacy of that it's like, well, I'm being told at school I'm a sack of shit. I'm going to sweep the streets, or I'm going to be emptying bins, but actually these people make me feel alive, and we've got our own music. I understand my culture. It goes back 15 years. That was really attractive to a kid. And the sad thing is that the films that people, I looked at making this film, and I actually went out to sort of almost find a film about skinheads that had been made, and I was almost hoping there'd be one made, so I didn't have to kind of make one. But when I went out there, with Romper Stomper, American History X, and Made in Britain, which obviously was more of a television film, you've kind of only really got that one side. And if I wanted to go and pitch a film, I'd probably much easier to get a Romper Stomper British version made than it would to be making This Is England with piano music in it and something far more sensitive to it. But I realised there was a huge gap there. So if I was sort of going, I used to be a skinhead, people think it means I used to be a racist, and I was not a racist.
Is that why it took so long? Because, I mean, usually when filmmakers start, and you have been a kind of, autobiographical filmmaker, a filmmaker self-starting, normally when filmmakers start, they say, well, go with what you know. So the first or the second film is usually slightly more autobiographical. This one is probably your most autobiographical yet. But it's taken you sort of 4 or 5 films to get to this. Were you scared of approaching this territory and sort of fessing up publicly that you used to be I was a teenage skinhead?
It wasn't that, I don't think. I think when I watched, there was a documentary on Dead Man's Shoes where I spoke about this evening, where I went to this flat with a skinhead, and I was a skinhead myself, and I'd sort of done everything I could do. I'd smoked this and drank that and took this and took that, and to prove I was a crazy bastard, and I wanted to, and basically I thought I was going to be a hard case. I was going to be a sort of super crook of the 21st century. That wasn't working out. I was getting caught pinching John Lowe World Edition dart sets, and I mean I did have like the worst possible record of crimes. I remember I got away with, the one I got away with was pinching damsons from a fruit shop, and then the only reason I got away with it because she rang my mum because she liked me, and so I got home and they were all waiting for me in a big line.
And Damson police.
The Damson police, yeah. And I also got caught putting a Datsun keyring back on the shop because I felt so guilty that I'd taken it. He caught me putting it back on the shelf, so that was not going anywhere. And from my own sort of perspective, I thought I thought I was something that I wasn't, basically, and I thought that I was like, I wanted to be like these people around me, especially like this guy that, you know, he'd tell me about these fights and he'd been in prison and he'd tell me all these stories, and I was like, you know, I want to see a real fight, I want to see a real fight. And I got taken and shown one for my own benefit, and it was the most horrific thing I've ever seen in my life. And seeing myself talk about that, not so much talking about it, but seeing myself, watching it back when it was on television, I kind of went, you know, you thought you began making films because of this, and this, and it was actually further back than that. And it was really that period. It was then when I sort of realised that I'd be, you know, that's when I'd moved on to a different path and started walking a different way. And that's what opened my eyes to it, to be honest. I wasn't scared of it. I'm not ashamed of it.
No, not
I've still got all the same tattoos and everything.
So if we go back to, because when I first met you, it was 10 years ago, introducing a selection of your short films, I should say. Not a selection of his shorts. That'd be disgusting. Well, I don't know if it'd be disgusting, but it'd be quite clean by now.
I've got a lot of shorts.
You got a nice pair of shorts?
I can swap them twice a day sometimes, so you've got no...
But I was introducing a selection of Shane's shorts at the ICA, of which one of which was Small Time Now, which is about those days when you were knocking off John Lowe darts boards. Small Time. What year was that?
I think I shot it 95 and it came out in 96.
And I mean, your themes are quite established. So there's dialogue, there's the kind of the cheeky kind of monetary exchanges, there's nicking stuff. There's you in it as an actor, which we haven't seen for a while.
Without the pastor influence, slightly slimmer.
Did you? I mean, did you want to be an actor director at that point?
No, not at all. No, the first films that I actually ever made, I made by myself. I got chucked out of college, and not because my work wasn't amazing, but I got chucked out for financial reasons, and basically I was meant to get a job to pay my debts off that summer, and I actually ended up being a volunteer at a film centre in Nottingham. And this guy, everyone was away. All the people I was living with, all the students had gone off to, you know, Dubai and wherever they go in them summers, and I was at home, and it was Wimbledon was on, and all the people I liked had been knocked out. So I'd got this camera and I was on my own, and I started acting in front of it and making this ridiculous film, a very early clumsy version of Where's the Money, Ronnie. And I went back, and this guy was let me have use of the edit suite, and I chopped it together, and he thought it was okay and said borrow it next month, you know. And by the third month I'd made a couple of films by myself, and I was actually really confident acting in front of me, but obviously I'd always been petrified of acting in front of other people. And so I sort of, something in me clicked. It was like, it's not so much about what, you know, that sort of principal idea of like, well, what we actually think is film, and what we think, you know, it's if you feel comfortable in yourself, and if I could make myself feel comfortable enough to act and play different characters, then surely if I could make other people feel the same way. Because half the problem with people when they first start making films is that they get told, you know, it's like a new director's fund. You hear about these funds all the time, and a new director goes in, but he has to work with a producer who's established, or a DOP or such and such. He can't sort of work with those group of people that he feels comfortable with. And I worked outside of the radar, really, so I made mistakes, but even within the mistakes there was still something.
And you were using friends, family, anyone?
There was no actors, no. It was like there was a single mother next door and a girl up the road who just had a kid with her fella, Jimmy around the corner. You know, it was, I don't know what he was. He smoked a lot of weed, and he could play this incredible thing on the guitar, but nothing else. And he turned up in 5 or 6 of my short films, and so basically I then acted with people, and then ultimately by sort of 24/7 I pulled back and pushed them in, because I don't want to be an actor. It was something that I had to do out of necessity. So I sort of showed them my films initially, and they went, well, I'd love to be in one of those. So it was like really, and that's what I've tried to promote with other people, is rather than thinking, oh, you know, you need to follow a traditional route, is actually maybe you've got an insane uncle or someone in your family that only you have access to, and you know that's what you need to do.
And is that what you mine when you're writing? Because I mean, you're as much the scripts are written by you as much as a process on the set, because you're quite improvisational, aren't you, with your cast, but you draw it out of them.
Yeah, I think Once Upon a Time in the Midlands was the one time I tried to write a story rather than telling a story. I tried to sort of write something that wasn't from my own experience. And it's not like, you know, obviously I can't go on making films about my own life forever, but I need to care about the people that are in it rather than, you know, like a fabrication. And that's what I learnt from that. And that's why Dead Man's Shoes, although it wasn't about very specific people, was about something that meant something to me, and that comes through from the film. And I think the same with This Is England. And as long as I continue to do that, and same for anybody that's trying to make films, is you just spend 2 years of your life being battered from pillar to post and fighting and arguing over cuts, and it's a really long time, and you need to really believe in what you're doing, because if you don't, you give in.
What would you say? Would you say stick up for your own ideas, or would you say take the ideas of those who pretend to know better than you?
Well, if you care about it, and the people that are in the film you know to some degree, whatever that is, then how can someone prove you wrong? If they're people if you've created characters, then in the end, I think they're fallible. But whereas if you say, well, this guy, I knew this guy, how can you tell me when I knew him or I knew him? I'm not saying that didn't happen so much on This Is England, but that's kind of what I learned, was if these are people that I know, then they're my people, not your people, and how can you tell me what to do with them?
We mentioned there the shorts that went from that you were filming. Where did you film that? By the seaside. It looks like you filmed it in Spain or something. It looks beautiful.
that was in Sneinton. I was making all my short films in Sneinton in Nottingham, and we actually had the budget. I made a documentary for Channel 4 about a bare knuckle fighter, which is a story I still want to tell as a feature film. And the wages that I got from that were used to make Small Time. I got about,
how much was that?
About £4,000. And I mean, I'd never had. I mean, I owed money everywhere at this time, and for me to put all of that money into a film was major. Because for me, that was like I thought I could retire on that sort of money, and I put it all into the film. And because I got offered a film just before I made Small Time, it was about a £300,000 budget, and it was like one of those choices you get put in front of you, and I didn't like it, and I didn't get it, but I'd have earned about 20-30 grand off it. But I didn't want my first film to be a piece of shit,
Because it was someone else's script. It was one you couldn't bring any ideas to.
Yeah, but I would have earned enough money to maybe make Small. I could have. But even back then, I could not sacrifice it. I just thought to myself, well, I'd rather fail with my own £5,000 than I know I'm going to fail with that. But to me then, they were shooting on film and I was shooting on video. They were going to Morocco and I was shooting in Sneinton. It was. It wasn't it was an easy choice to make, because there was never a choice to make.
But it's all about markets and bartering anyway, wherever you go.
For sure, yeah.
Then you went on to do 24/7, which you did, having done these kind of bright, hyper-real shorts that had this great colour. You did this quite brave for your first feature, I thought, 24/7. Black and white, about boxing. It was quite sort of downbeat compared to the kind of low-life kind of upbeatness that was in the short films. What made you kind of say, I've done all this bright stuff and shelved it, so I'm going to go black and white for my next one?
I think I kind of, I took I give Stephen Woolley a lot of credit, because, it was almost like he asked me what I wanted to make, and he asked me which characters were, he said, what have you got in your locker, and I told him about this guy, Naishi, from Uttoxeter, who'd set up a football team for us when we were kids, and, this guy, there was sort of something, this guy was a bit haunted. As much as he was like incredible as a football coach, was also something really sad and vulnerable about this guy. And he's still in Uttoxeter now, and he's a really amazing local character. But at the same time, there was this loneliness that surrounded him, So I didn't kind of want to depart. It just, that was him, and and I sort of like wanted to pay homage to him, really, because I realised as I grew a bit older, that he believed in all of these kids and put all of his heart and soul into these kids, and they just pissed and shit on him from a great height, and it was like, as an adult, you saw people mocking him in the street and taking the mick out of this guy, and you were thinking, in his heart of hearts, he's an incredible bloke.
That's not presumably how you pitched it to Bob Hoskins when you asked him to get the role.
No, I was honest, and I said, for me, it's a sort of study of loneliness, if you like, that this idea of someone floating around and attaching themselves to other people to try and help other people as a way of avoiding the hole in themselves, And
after 24/7, you did A Room for Romeo Brass, which the blue underpants of which adorn my shelves today, even now. I think it's a fantastic film, a wonderful kind of evocation of childhood, which stars one of the stars of This Is England, Andrew Shim,
and Vicky McClure, who plays Lol in this. She played his sister, and they're dating now. It's a strange setup.
You've spawned that.
Yeah.
You feel like...
Well, I knew Andrew liked her even then, I could tell. But he had to sort of... he was about, 4'3" or something, and she was 15. They were both 15 at the time, and so you know, it's really mad that they've come full circle and they worked together as a couple on this. And I mean, Andrew was. I mean, I went in, you know, with a white family, looking for a white child, and Andrew was the person for the part, you know, and it was kind of like I was looking for me really, and in the same way that I'm not like, you know, I'm not got well, Tomo isn't ginger, he would never let me say that.
At least I've got it.
Yeah, but he didn't.
At least I've got it, he says.
Yeah, you're 14, you don't get bald till you're about 18, so you know, and it's all about connection and chemistry, and you know, and I met Andrew, and I got told at the audition when I first went to pick the kids that this guy who was running the place, so I've got a decent relationship with, but he told me out of everyone that was there, the one person he couldn't recommend was Andrew. Yeah, yeah, and that because I've always been an outsider myself, I instantly wanted to like him, and he was absolutely phenomenal. So I created a kind of, you know, he's like, you know, his mum's could be mixed race, he's Jamaican, his dad's a white Cockney, you know, but no one gives a shit because it feels right, you know, and that's kind of like, and I knew families like that, you know. I went out with a girl who had a kid, you know, they were mixed race, and I'd walk down the street with this girl, and I'm white and she's white, and he's not, and people used to look at you, you know, but it happens, you know, it just happens, and I had to pick the right person for the part, and if that meant whatever it meant. And you know, the maddest thing about it is I never got asked about that. I thought I'm going to go out there and people are going to go, what the friggin' hell's going on there? And no one did, because they gelled as a family, you know.
It always astounded me that nobody ended up seeing that film.
Yeah.
Almost, it just sort of disappeared, which I thought was extraordinary, because I was urging people to see it. I loved every sort of second of it. It kind of reminded me of everything about growing up. And you've captured it there, almost in that clip for everyone here in the room. You can feel the atmospheres that you captured. Is that something you, as you're working, do you kind of bear that with you? You kind of say, no, it didn't. If something doesn't feel right, doesn't feel like it reflects the actual childhood you had, you say, no, I'm not having it. I'm going to wait till I get the actual shot that really works for me.
I suppose, I mean, especially on Romeo Brass, it was as much about Fraser and my relationship with him growing up as it was my own life, because that was him, you know.
Paul Fraser who wrote your scripts.
Yeah, Paul Fraser and me, he'd come in to help write 24/7, and then we wrote Romeo Brass together, and it was him. He had a bad back, and he was the one that, you know, basically had to spend 2 or 3 years of his life in bed, and we ended up having this very separated relationship. And it was that thing that, you know, I sort of signified everything, all the characters that I went off and hung around with in one person in Morel. I didn't actually just have one mate and whatever. I kind of disappeared. He was in bed, and I let him down, and I did turn up in his bedroom and laugh at him because his hair was about this long, and he was about 42 stone, and you know, and you know, at the end of the day, that was kind of something very specific to me and him. But it was that period just before you sort of hit puberty, when, you know, the porno mag thing and all that. I mean, that actually was like, you know, his dad had the best collection of natural ladies. You know, these people they were just as God made them, and I needed those magazines, and only Andrew in the auditions could portray that desperation. I had those yearnings to see those French ladies in the park stood around with the suspenders on and what have you.
Was it actually your magazines?
No, they were his dad's. He had a big pile next to his bed, and we used to flick through them when his dad was at work and what have you. But I wanted them for myself. Yeah, and so basically, and there's only, you know, and it's like when you get a kid who can actually do it. I mean, God knows what's going on in his own life, but he managed to pull it off. Whether he's pretending,
Pull it off.
yeah. Who said it? Benny Hill.
Exactly. Romeo Brass would also be known for the relationship between the two kids was disrupted and unbalanced by the arrival of a threatening presence,
Yeah.
which is something that you've brought into your film since then. That threatening presence in Romeo Brass was Paddy Considine, an actor who at that time was completely new to me. Obviously now he's a major star. I can't be with us tonight because he's I don't know.
He's in LA.
He's in LA, is he? Yeah, is
LAX.
he? I'm sure he is.
Yeah.
Having dinner with Tom. He's going into an enormous. Tell us about how you had this relationship with Paddy Considine, because we're going to see it a bit later in Dead Man's Shoes. It started in Romeo Brass. Where did you get Paddy from? How do you know Paddy?
I mean, me and Paddy were at drama school together. I say drama school. It was a drama course that the local tech was running, and we met on there. I'd gone the first year and had a motorbike accident, and had to go back a year. I ended up with pins and plates in my legs, and so I went back into Paddy's year, and so it was kind of like almost very fortuitous that we ended up in the same class together, and within being together for a month, we'd been split up in the class. We were like 17, you know, and we were getting separated like we were 9-year-olds, and we'd go on trips. We were a nightmare for any teacher, because the second we met each other, it was, I don't know what he says in Heart to Heart, but it was that. And we really were a nightmare, to be honest. Murder, yeah. You know, basically, we were too big for that place, really. They couldn't, you know, I think we were a nightmare, but at the same time, there was a lot of talent there, but no one knew how to harness it.
So he was always the actor, and you were always the director. Was that relationship already established?
Yeah, kind of. I think, obviously, you don't quite know which way you're going, but basically, it was like with Gavin Clark, my friend Gavin, and, you know, I thought I wanted to be a musician, and then I heard Gavin play a song, and I just went, I'm never going to be a musician. This guy's unbelievable. And the same with acting. I thought, I want to be an actor. And then Paddy did this New York Cop in the canteen one day. And I was like, oh, friggin', I'm never going to be an actor. You know, and I was always honest with myself in that respect. If I couldn't be the best at what I wanted to be, then I didn't want to be it, you know. And I suppose, and we ended up being in a band together, actually, me and Paddy. And we toured, we left college, we had a really great year or two, fell out. Both ended up doing photography courses in different parts of the country, and I didn't see him for a few years. And I made small time in, I think, 24/7, and he came back from college. He was in his final year, going into his final year of his degree, and was doing really well on his course. And I sort of said to him, look, you know, what you showed me, you know, I've worked with these people, and a lot of these people are non-actors. I know how talented you are, and if you're ever interested, I'm doing another film next year. I'd love you to come to an audition. And although we hadn't been, we weren't not speaking, but we sort of, that close bond that we had dissipated. And I showed him the films, and I think he sort of thought to himself, he realised that when we were at college and they're saying, you know, making us walk around in circles to get in character and that, and you know, being car engines in dance classes and what have you, it wasn't our particular brand of what we were going to be good at, really. And I think when he saw what I'd made, in his absence, I think he decided he'd like to have a go, and this part of Morale was minute. It was a 2 or 3 scene part, and then he came to the rehearsals, and that Paddy came to every single rehearsal. This was before we chose who was going to be the kid, so I picked him first for this small part, and so because he was having to then rehearse with all these kids, he was getting the best background for his character, and we brought this accent in, and once he brought that accent in, it was kind of like magic started to happen. You could put him anywhere, and he'd do it. You'd be on the way back, you'd pull him for petrol, and he'd be chatting the lady up as Morale. You know, I think I need to be dating you, lady, and he'd be off on one and roll in, and everywhere he went, he'd be this character. And all the way through, we'd bring executives over from America because we had some money from Canada, and he would be Morale to them, and he'd pitch his Godzilla idea to them on the bus. And so this actor was born that was so... He had no idea what he was meant to be doing, but was so Stanislavski, it was frightening, you know. And that was the birth of it, really. This part that was meant to be 2 or 3 scenes became a linchpin in the whole film. And because he was involved from such an early stage, like I said earlier on, people can come on my films, and if they're good enough, their part will grow. And that was one of those cases. Okay.
Just in case nobody heard, it's about the balancing of the technical aspect of working with non-professionals at Tomo with the naturalism that we've so enjoyed in all the clips and in This Is England.
Yeah, I mean, in reference to what you read, that was really when Tomo, the first day he came on set, he'd obviously been in a rehearsal room in Nottingham, and then he turned up and there was a great big boom pole with a big furry mic on it and cameras, and, you know, it didn't actually take him that long to get used to that. I think the way that I probably try and get round that is to work with the actors for a couple of months before we actually get on set, and whenever we go on set, rather than the actors working around the technical requirements of like, you know, people never go on my sets and light before I've rehearsed my scene. So I will actually take whoever it is, say for instance Tomo and his mum, and we'll go up and work on the scene. If it takes 5 minutes to get a scene or it takes 5 hours to get a scene, we always get it how we want it first, and then we invite everybody in to watch what we've done, and then they work out. Me and Danny would sit down and go, you know, Danny will come up with his ideas of how to shoot it, and so everything's based on what we've done first. And I think in a lot of films, especially films with bigger budgets than that, the actors have to work around technically what's going on. You have to land on this mark and do that, and then this explosion is going to happen. And you know, in my films, I suppose it's easier for non-actors with me because we get to make what we want to make first, and then we reveal it to the rest of the crew afterwards. Okay, I mean, the basic premise behind the Falklands, there was two things. One, that as an adult, looking at the material from that time, because I got access because I wanted to basically use, what's it called, Mark? Archive. Thank you. Yeah, technical word.
Producer that, isn't he?
ARCHIVE. And I wanted to use this archive material, and I was actually staggered because I think you build an idea up of what went on in a war, or what happened, who you were fighting. And as a kid, I remember it was almost like a World Cup campaign. England to go into Italy, smash the ITEL, and it was very similar. It was like, bring down the Arges, we got you, and there was boats, and there was actually people's dads and people's fucking children dying in these things that we were laughing at, and then when I saw the people that we were actually fighting against, the shame that came over me was unbelievable, because it was like, well, we look like we've got paratroopers out there, and they look like there's actually kids who've just literally been pulled out of school and dropped on an island to have a fight, and that for me was paralleled in that nature of that beast of someone like Combo, that someone with that sort of rage, the whole thing of having that sort of massive advancement in technology, and the Iraq war, the first time that went on, of separating yourself out, how you can read the headlines, and especially the Iraqi crisis the first time around. We watched the whole war from night vision in an aeroplane and watched little puffs of smoke coming out of buildings without realising this fucking thing is going to rip through. You have no concept of what the reality of it is, and I felt a lot of shame for that, because I'd sort of been there like all the other kids, almost waving Union Jacks, going, kill everybody, kill them all, they're really evil, they look like Mario, kill them, it was like, it's horrific, and so, the film is this microcosm of that sort of behaviour, of like almost hating something and not knowing why you hate it. And that's what the National Front represented to me. They didn't just hate the fact that these people, in their eyes, if it was about jobs, if it was about taking jobs and, you're taking food out of my child's mouth, then that's one thing, but it wasn't. It was about the spices, it was about the smell, it was about the religion, it was about the fact that they couldn't integrate with them, they didn't know how to, they couldn't stand the fact that they were much more unified family-wise, and they looked after the old people, and, it was a complete hatred of the culture. It wasn't to do with jobs, and, and so that, for me, the film was this microcosm of these much bigger ideas, and at the end of it, Combo is looking at that guy and he's just jealous. He's just jealous of the fact that he thought this kid was going to be like him. He wasn't going to have parents like him, and he'd made this massive assumption that because he was black, he wasn't going to have a father, or, and he jumped to this enormous conclusion. So the film became this sort of microcosm for much bigger themes. And when I watched the footage of, the British soldiers weren't taking the piss, but when you see somebody pulling a piece of tarpaulin over a body, that little body, whether it be 16 or 17 years old, was born at some point, went to school at some point, learned to read, learned to write, learned to walk, ride a bike, and the fact that I could have, when I was that age, and we can all do it now with the news, things just wash over you, and so I wanted to make people care about something so small. So the fact that I've got an 18 certificate for one fight in a film, that sort of proves the point that we managed to hit what we tried to hit. And, I wished it wasn't an 18, but so if people can warrant something an 18 certificate over one act of violence where somebody doesn't even die, yet they'll give a 15 to 300 slaughters, or the film 300, that tells you something about us, I think.
It's quite interesting that you mentioned that the 18 certification, which we mentioned at the start, because Tomo couldn't come and see the film here, ridiculously. it's something that local councils can overturn. The BBFC ruling of an 18 certificate, local councils can say, no, we're going to show it as a 15. I think Bristol was today said they are, and you're trying... Grimsby are trying to do it, so that Tombo and his family and his mates can go and see it. This can you're trying to sort of exert that pressure throughout the UK. I mean, the film comes out on Friday. How hopeful do you feel about that?
I mean, not massively hopeful. Some people have overturned it, and at the end of the day, it's not an easy decision to make. I'm not like calling these people. I'm not calling them buffoons, idiot. It's not an easy film. There's no two ways about it. But I think there's far more danger of copycat crime or copycat violence in things that give you no concept or consequence of violence. You look at films like Natural Born Killers, which spawned this thing, and it's just literally like whack him, kill this person, kill that person to music, roll on another 15 corpses. Whereas one person getting beaten up in a flat in this film has a repulsive effect. So that's why I'm a bit gutted, because I sort of think it actually has the complete opposite effect of what they're worried about.
But the BBFC said to me that it was too subtle. That's why it's an 18. They couldn't. It was too subtle. It would confuse people. Your film was too good to be kind of to actually be appreciated.
Yeah, I think they're scared. That's fair enough. It's a very difficult subject matter, and obviously at the moment politically, it's a really difficult subject to face. So I get it. But I know what you're saying. I am sort of sat here at the minute thinking exactly that, to be honest with you. I'm sort of like, what on earth do I make? Because obviously I can't make another one about me, because me's not interesting enough to pull another one out. But at the same time, all I have to do ultimately is really care about the person and be touched by that story. And there's 4 or 5 stories around me at the moment, ranging from films that I could make for a couple of $100,000 to things like The King of the Gypsies, which is a documentary I made, and I would love to sort of make as a feature film, which is a massive story detailing gypsy culture from the 40s to the year 2001. So I've got a massive array of projects that are out there that aren't really based on myself anymore, but it all comes down to how this film does Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and what happens beyond there. So as a filmmaker, it's not just a simple case of sort of going, I've got this or I've got that, because it's okay having The King of the Gypsies, but if I've not got the financial clout, I have to use, Brad Pitt as the King of the Gypsies and Mark Herbert as the ringmaster in The King of the Gypsies. All jokes aside, it really is one of them sort of situations where you have to see how you do. And I've got immense support with Film 4 and EM Media, and the Film Council have supported me on the last 2 films, but at the same time, something like that probably needs, a really big, decent-sized budget, because I don't want to tell the story of the gypsy community and not have the right caravans and not have, so I've got bigger projects out there, and I've got things that would be seen to be smaller projects out there as well. But it's all a case of really, what the world will let me make, within me wanting to do it how I want to do it. Rather, I could make anything, but I don't want to have Ted Danson in it,
Ted Danson. Reviving the career of Ted Danson.
Steve Guttenberg.
Exactly. Cheers, love. But I find it almost upsetting that you're now in the point where you say it needs to do well Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I need to have a big opening weekend, because This Is England, it seems to me, is a film that people will sort of say, oh, have you seen that? Building word of mouth. It needs a chance to kind of grow. It's not an immediate sort of great attraction to loads of people that a line of skinheads is on the poster up against a fence. And you're saying it needs an opening weekend, and I really think it's a film that needs to kind of...
Oh yeah, no, I mean I'm just trying to sort of express a point.
No,
really.
I think you're right though. I think it does need an opening weekend.
Yeah, but
I
could make the film, but I think to make it under my own terms, I've just got to be realistic. $10-15 million in this country is really hard to pull off, and but only under my own terms. Not many people make films like I make films, where they want to change things all the time. It's a lot to ask for someone. I've not got $15 million to stick into something, and if I was, I'm sure I'd be quite paranoid about what was going to actually be shot. So I understand it, but it would be, I want to make things when it's right to make them. And when I can make them kind of, as myself, so if This Is England becomes the pinnacle and actually sort of does really well for me, then maybe that's the chance to sort of roll something out and get that little bit of extra support from people without having to change my process. For me, my ending of the film is a burial of his father. It signifies obviously the things that he believed in. That doesn't have to be the things. It wasn't like England he's throwing in there, but it's that thing of being a kid, and we all believe in something, whether it's your first summer love or, you know, we've all had a heart broken at some point. But at the same time, the bigger message for me is that he's putting his father to rest. He's putting that flag. You know, it's as much about him telling Margaret Thatcher to fuck off as it is about him saying, I'm letting you go, Dad, as it is about saying, Combo, I don't believe a word of what you're saying. It's not that simple. It's that complexity that only, you know, a kid can go there and throw that flag in to the water, and it means a million things to him at that particular point in time. It's not really specifically about, you know, England at that particular stage. I mean, the flag, that English flag in dirty water resonates through Oi songs, and, you know, there's obviously metaphorical background, and, you know, you could add detail to it, but from my point of view, the main thing behind that was him kind of coming to terms with that summer and the past year of his life. I
was reminded of that. It was one of the other films that finishes on a shot of the Union Jack is Alan Clark's Rita, Sue and Bob 2, where he's having sort of sex with two girls underneath the bedspread of the Union Jack. And it kind of, I don't know if that was a reference in particular.
It wasn't, no. Yeah.
But I pulled it. I'm happy with it. Yeah. But I mean, it was a symbol of Englishness that was a kind of about the kind of.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, no.
It has that great symbolism. Brilliant. Well done, you. Dad.
Oh, what makes a good dad? I mean, my dad's a great dad. He's flawed. He likes booze, and you know, he's a lorry driver. So my dad. The reason I think I'm sort of obsessed with that is my dad was a long distance lorry driver, and I idolised him. I thought my dad was Elvis Presley till I was about 9, and I idolised him, and he wasn't there a lot of the time because he had to work, and so that's probably where a touch of my own sort of seeking this kind of other person. And then I think when you get to teenage, it happens naturally anyway. You know, you move from the home, and you know, some people it's David Beckham. With me, it was John McVicar and Jimmy Boyle. You know, you pick what you pick. You know, I mean, I think there's. I don't know if you could possibly denote a good dad. I mean, you know, it's probably in the child at the end of the day. That's probably the only way to tell a good dad, is if the child.
You're not a dad, are you?
Well. Not that I'm aware of. There's been a few in the Utoxeter Advertiser that claim rights to my heirlooms, but no, I'm not a father as I know it. Apart from Shimmy and Tomo.
Cheers, Dad.
No. I mean, it's an impossible question. Apart from the fact that obviously, ask the kids. You know, I mean, I know my friend Fraser's an incredible dad, and I know Mark Herbert's the most wonderful dad, and one of Mark's daughters is his birth daughter, one's adopted. You know, I think in today's society, you know, there's plenty of people out there that can naturally have children that are the worst parents out there, and there's plenty of people out there that can adopt a child and give it the best possible start. So it's difficult to know. I know I'd love to be a dad myself, and I probably am somewhere out there. There's a little kid going around that's balding and got very strange little feet and very broad shoulders. I'll know him when I see him.
Shane, I think on that note, we all need to go and dance to some Trojan music. Toots and the Maytals et al. The party's on in the Film Cafe. It is to celebrate what I think is a wonderful film. I hope you do too. This is England, and the director has been Shane Meadows.